So I went from making 100K months in recruitment to completely burnt out and depressed and back again. And today I'm going to tell my recruitment story. So obviously I'm not Brett, the Lone Recruiter. I'm Beth. I'm actually one of the team members here at the Lone Recruiter. Brett, king of not getting sick or anything, is sick. We were meant to do this episode as a interview, but I'm going to step in and I'm just going to tell my story. So I started with a recruitment agency fresh out of uni, had no real skills in the corporate world. It was my first corporate gig, but I had a whole lot of really big goals that I wanted to achieve. And I looked at the ad for a recruiter and I went, yeah, I can really make some good money here. I'd just gotten engaged. I was trying to pay for a wedding. I was trying to buy my first apartment. And there are a whole slew of other things that you want as like a, 22-year-old, right? So I jumped into this role, knew nothing about recruitment. I think like a lot of other recruiters out there, I actually fell into the position, but I actually really enjoyed it. I had huge phone fear at the beginning, and that was something I had to push through. But I think within about the first 12 to 14 months, I had paid for my wedding. I had earned a deposit for my first apartment, bought my first apartment. I'd bought a new car, and it was fantastic. I was thinking, wow, this job is something that can really set me up for my future. I was enjoying it. I was surrounded by a fantastic group of people. But then I started going down into what I didn't recognize it back then, but now I recognize was a spiral towards burnout and eventually full-blown depression. So here's what went wrong. And I think what a lot of people don't tell you about when you achieve really big life goals is that on the other side, there can be a bit of a void. When you don't have a purpose, when you don't have something that you are looking forward to or that you really want or something that really speaks to your core values, recruitment can be a tough gig. I think there's actually two reasons why I went from being right up here, having 100K months, to fully burnt out and depressed. And I won't blame everything that happened on the company. That is certainly part of it, and I will go into that. But I was definitely at fault here as well. So I had reached all these fantastic goals. I had gotten so much out of the job I was doing. I'd had to build up a market from scratch. I was given nothing. I learned so many valuable skills. But then after reaching those goals, I was a bit lost. I lost a bit of that motivation that had kept me going and kept me doing so well in that first year. I wasn't quite sure why I was coming into work every day, and it actually does make it quite tough, right? So the second part of that is, whilst I was having a bit of a mindset battle with myself, a lack of motivation, the company I was working for at the time also really tightened. So they went from having record months, great years, to their own poverty spiral where all the markets shifted and tightened instead of a positive kind of environment to rebuild the past successes. The management went the other way. So we went from having strong hours in the morning to be able to focus on getting all the important stuff done, your BD, your calls, everything like that, to being pulled into 2 to 3 hour meetings every morning. And it's not even just the meetings taking up what is such an important time of the day for a recruiter, but it was also, let's just say it wasn't particularly positive. We would get pulled into these meetings and told, you're not good enough. What are you guys doing? You aren't achieving what you need to be. Every now and then you'd actually get singled out in front of the entire rest of the company as not being good enough at your job. You would get called names. It was all the things that when I look back now, I could see was actually a very, very abusive relationship. But back then, this was my first corporate role. I had no idea what was acceptable in the corporate world and what wasn't. So you kind of think as a new super green employee that, these are just some things you have to put up with, right? Obviously, I now know that that's not the case. That kind of behavior is never acceptable in a corporate setting or in any setting. You should not treat people like that. We were also constantly told that we would never have it better anywhere else, which sounds extremely narcissistic, right? We had the very definition of the golden handcuffs on. We were capable of making money, but we were actually being put in a position where we were unable to. And it was just this huge recurring cycle. So as this all started happening, I didn't realize it at first, but I had begun this long downward spiral into burnout, into depression. And the thing you really don't realize about burnout is it doesn't just hit you, or at least it didn't for me. It's a very slow process. I kind of think of it now like if you go back to like shopping centers in Australia in the early 90s and 2000s, and they had those big circular, I guess, toys or charity bins where you would roll a coin and the coin would go around and around, and it would start really, really slow at first. But then as it gets closer and closer to dropping into the hole, it goes faster and faster and faster and faster before it finally drops. That's what burnt out felt like to me. And I had no idea at first. It was just in this big, slow circle. And then as it got closer and closer, the stress and everything else started mounting off until eventually the coin dropped and I couldn't take it anymore. Looking back on it, there were definitely warning signs. I started calling in sick more often to work. I would get up in the morning with no interest of getting out of bed, of going to the office, even seeing the people that I absolutely loved, because one of the things that actually kept me at that company far longer than I should have stayed were the people I worked with. I still work with some of those people to this day. We had such a supportive team around us that they kept me there. In some ways, I think I was also too scared to come into the office. There were other signs as well. I started drinking a lot more. I would stop seeing my friends. I stopped doing things outside of work that normally I would love doing. And I would just go out with the people from work because I guess I thought at the time that they're the only people that would understand how I felt, that would understand the stress. And obviously looking back, none of that is probably the right way to manage things. But gosh, I was 22, 23. I honestly knew no better. I hadn't had much thought about mental health and mindset. So this was just how I kind of went with it. So eventually I got to a point where I realized I was not in a healthy place. I was crying almost every single day when I left the office. I had no energy for anything else. And I remember my husband saying to me, my now husband saying to me, you need to quit. This place is not healthy for you. You are withdrawing from everyone in your life. You don't want to talk about it. I see you come home and you're so sad. You're so shut down, which is not me. Like, I am definitely a person that loves interacting with other people. I think a lot of recruiters are. But I felt like the risk of leaving and not knowing where else I could go or what else I was capable of doing was higher than the risk of staying, even though I knew that I wasn't happy. Eventually, I just came as a Sunday night, I remember, and I went to bed thinking, I can't do this anymore. So the risk of leaving finally was less than the risk of staying. And I walked into the office. So for those of you who don't know, Brett was my manager at this company, and he shielded me from so much of what was going on. He was always there every day to try and pick me up, make me feel better. He was so supportive of whatever I told him. There were so many times I came to him in tears, and he said at any time, if you need to leave, leave. If you don't want to leave, I'm going to help you get through this. But I went to him and I walked into the office and I just said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And he just said, I understand. And he also gave me so many options, and he just said, no matter what happens, I'm going to be there for you. So I walked out that day, and I remember feeling the moment I walked back to my car and left that office, I remember this feeling of a weight just being lifted off my shoulders. And I felt like I could breathe again. I felt hope again. I felt like there was opportunity out there again. And I hadn't even realized that all of those things had been blinded to me. And I think that's the thing about burnout. You don't actually realize how badly it's affecting you until you make a change. You do something that breaks the cycle that you are stuck in. Later on, when Brett told me he was going to start Aura and he'd like me to come work with him, it was a no-brainer. He had such a clear vision of creating an agency that was almost the complete opposite to how the old agency had been, which was wellness first. You work to live, you don't live to work. And just creating an atmosphere where people felt safe, where they felt valued, where engagement was positive, there was no abusive language, you weren't called names in meetings. So when he said that, I was on board straight away. But I did have to do some work on myself before I could even contemplate going back. And that was fine because he was still working at the other company and he had a few things he had to set up before he could even start the agency. So when people ask me now, how did I pull myself out of this? It was tough. I'll be honest. It's not an overnight fix. It's not something you can just wake up and say, I'm not going to have burnout today. I'm done. I'm good. There was a long process that I kind of went through. And some things were easier than others. And some things, when I look back now, I realize how much it still affects me to this day in terms of what I do, in terms of my habits and not going back to that place. But if anyone else is there now and you're thinking, what the hell can I do to get out? And you've realized that this is the state you're in. There's a couple of things that helped me that maybe they'll help you, maybe they won't, but I hope I can help someone. So the first thing I did was obviously remove myself from that situation. Now, that won't be everyone's solution because you might actually still love the job. There might be other reasons that you're burnt out. And recruitment itself wasn't the reason for me that I was burnt out. It was that we'd ended up in this place where instead of trying to motivate staff and stay positive, we'd gone into a very, very negative poverty cycle where abuse was starting to be thrown around, right? So recruitment might not be your issue. I do think, though, that some kind of break is needed because you cannot break the cycle of being in burnout by doing the same things you're doing day in, day out. You just can't. You've got to make a change somewhere. So whether or not you take an extended holiday or build new things into your routine that give you the opportunity to disconnect, to take a step back, whatever that looks like for you, you do need to make a change in your everyday life. It's that simple. The second thing I did that I found really, really helped me was reach out, surround yourself with the right people. There will always be people in your life who, when you tell them your problems, they'll say, oh, you're fine. Just push through it. Get over it. They're not the right people to surround yourself with if you are in this position. You need people that are going to tell you it is okay the way you're feeling. We're going to help you get out of this. So I surrounded myself. Obviously, my husband was there. He was extremely, extremely supportive through this whole thing. When I said I need to just quit with no thoughts of how the hell I was going to make money or keep paying the mortgage or anything like that, he just said, great, quit and do it straight away. I'll pick up some extra hours in my job so that you know that financially there's not going to be an issue. Take a break. You need it. You need to reset. You need to start building yourself back up. So his support during that time was absolutely vital for me. Brett was the second person who I would say really helped me to get out of this. So even after I left the company, he would call me every single morning and just ask, how are you today? He's not asking about work. He wasn't asking about how I was going in terms of wanting to start his own agency. It was just a, hey, how you feeling? Find those people that will support you. But you cannot underestimate how important people are for your recovery. People will be there to pull you up. it can be hard to reach out and to let people know how you feel in this time, but the right people will help you recover. The third thing I did was look at all of the things that I had started to neglect in my life. And I think with burnout and with the depression I'd fallen into, I hadn't even noticed at first. I started not doing the things that I love to do. And it's not because you don't love to do them anymore, but it's because with all of the stress and everything else going on in your life, you actually don't have the capacity to add anything else to your routine. And so I had stopped doing all the exercise I loved doing. At the time, I was taking pole dancing classes. I was playing soccer. I would go for walks every single night with my husband. I was doing so much outside of my job. And I'd stopped doing almost all of that because by the time I got home from work, I was so stressed out. I was so emotionally exhausted. All I wanted to do was go to bed. So I knew I didn't have the capacity straight away to be able to add all of those things back in. So I just started with one. I started going for walks with my husband every night again. And once I felt like that was back to a normal part of my routine, I started playing soccer again. And once I felt that I was comfortable adding that back into my life, I didn't actually go back to pole dancing classes because I kept getting too injured. But I started going back out with friends that I felt like I had completely neglected during this whole period. And eventually I started building back a routine. And with each thing I added back in, I didn't know this at the time either, but I was actually rebuilding my capacity to handle all these other things in my life. And I was building back confidence in myself to be able to handle it again. So now I look back and obviously I still work with Brett. And I'm a big believer in everything he does at Alra and the Lone Recruiter. And particularly my purpose is to help him get the message of how we can build up recruitment and make it better and help make recruiters stronger and happier. And that drives me to this day. I love the message. And I now have a wonderful family. I'm very happy where I live. I'm happy in my job. I've got 2 beautiful boys. So I guess I want to say to anyone that is at that absolute bottom of that burnout spiral, and I know how it feels. You can't see light anywhere. You just feel trapped. You feel like you're never going to get out of this. I want to say to you, you are. There is a light at the end of that tunnel. You can't see it now. I understand that, but you will see it. You can handle this. You have capacity to handle this, and you will get there. That's not to say your life will be without challenges. Of course it will. Life always throws something at us, right? But whilst you don't have the capacity to deal with it now, I can guarantee you will get there. So that is my story. I hope that I have helped someone out there. I think recruitment can be a very, very tough business, but it can also be an incredibly rewarding one. And not just in terms of money. Obviously, we help so many people day in, day out, and that can be so energizing. So if you're a recruiter who is on struggle street right now, I just want you to know that you're not alone. There are a lot of people that are going through similar things to you. And then if you need the help, reach out. Brett in particular is always happy to speak to people who are struggling. I am too. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and I can see if I can help you in any way. But that's all for today. So thank you for listening. And as Brett would say, I'm obviously not Brett. May all your deals come true.